Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk Comics. I am your host, Jim Viscardi, and this is the podcast where we go one-on-one with your favorite creators in comics to find out how they got into comics, why they got into comics, what they're still doing in comics, and what they've got coming up. It is also the official Image Comics podcast. That is right. And so, my guest today is a doozy, is a great one, and actually so timely because his mentor was David Finch, my previous guest, and is one of the most in-demand artists in the business. Jason Fabok, one of the members of Ghost Machine, working with the great crew over there, headed up by Geoff Johns. You know him as, you may know him from the work he's done on Justice League or the Batman book he did with Jeff. He's done... Everything he does is just pure gold and looks absolutely amazing. But we're not going to talk about that stuff. We're talking about how, like I said, how he broke in, what being mentored by David Finch was like, and how all of that led to the partnership and the birth of Ghost Machine with Geoff Johns. And that partnership gave us Rook Exodus. Rook Exodus is a massive original sci-fi epic that feels as lived in as it does, visionary. And so in the episode, Jason and I kind of dig into how the first arc came together, because we're talking basically on the eve of the second arc. And so, in the first arc, there's a lot of world building and designs and how the Wardens come together and, the scope of it and what it takes to, instead of playing with someone else's toys, you're taking your own and building the world around it. And then when it comes time to, really talk about the second arc, where, this story is a bit different for Jason in a number of ways, not just to kind of where in the tone of the arc, but also some of the new characters and the new threats and twists that fans are not going to see coming. So it's really, really fun. Jason, I could have talked to Jason for not only for another hour, I could have talked to Jason for another 2 hours. It was that kind of conversation, that kind of fun. And so before we get to that, let's just make sure we get to some of the business. If you're listening to the show, stop what you're doing right now. Take a screenshot, share it on social media, tag me, tag Jason, tag Image. Let us know you're listening. We love seeing that stuff. And if you haven't already, head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. Head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating, leave a comment on the episode if you want. And yeah, those are great ways to support the show. So we appreciate your support as always. And we're just going to get right into it. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's talk comics. Jason, welcome.
Hey Jim, how are you?
I'm super excited because I've been a fan of your stuff for a while, and it was one of those things where I was kind of like itching for a chance to get to meet you and kind of thing, and so now I'm glad I get to selfishly use this as a way to do it. So and so here we are. Okay, so. In order for us to get started, we need to kind of start at the beginning a little bit. We need the Jason origin story. We need to know if art for you and comics was always the destiny, or is there a world where you were repairing motorcycles or something, in some way.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a farmer.
Okay.
Because all my grandparents were farmers, and I grew up in a farming community, and so I love tractors and all that kind of stuff, and so that was. But then I realized later I was adverse to all manual labor, so that wouldn't have really worked. And it's funny, like my wife and I, we like watching a lot of we were just watching Clarkson Farm, which is a show on Amazon, where it's this guy who's he's from the Grand Tour, Jeremy Clarkson, and he bought this farm, and then he's trying to farm it, but he has no clue what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And she always jokes saying we watch these shows with this romantic view of farming, but really I wouldn't enjoy it whatsoever.
But are you are you in a space now where you can homestead a little bit? Do you?
That's our next big thing. Is my big goal is to actually buy a property that's more out in the country.
Okay.
Maybe not the maybe not the farm, but it would be nice to have like a cool little.
Right.
I mean, we have a garden here, but it'd be nice to have like a little garden and some trees and a bush and things you could, you know, like my we'll talk about this a little bit, but my mentor David Finch, like
Yeah.
he lives on like he has like a horse ranch and all kinds of stuff and pigs. Or
Which
I don't know if he has pigs, but
I never would have expected. And then I saw him start to like post some of those pictures, and I was like,
yeah,
this man is living a way different life than I expected.
yeah.
Which I
I
love.
look at him all the time, and I'm like, oh man, that's kind of the life I would.
That's
I
the dream.
Want. It's like maybe I'll get there one day, but
draw comics,
no,
live on a farm. That's it.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
Yeah. But so that was my first kind of thing I wanted to do, and then growing up, a lot of my dreams focused around the arts. I wanted to. For a long time there through high school, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to get into movie directing. Played in bands and stuff. So at one point, I thought maybe being a musician. But the film thing didn't happen. I didn't get into college, film college that I really wanted to get into, and kind of questioned like why, you know. And then somebody brought up I was always drawing, and I loved comic books, but I when you're 15 years old and you're looking at, you know, Jim Lee and these kind of guys, Steve McNiven, and you're thinking like, I could never draw like that. Like I'll never be good enough to have that kind of skill to work in this professionally. But the one thing you don't realize is like it takes years of practice and honing your skill and really getting serious about it. And so I kind of, comic books is always kind of in the back of my mind. And my guidance counselor in high school said, why don't you take this course? It's an animation course at a local college here. And so I did 3 years of that. And I learned in that course, number one, I learned I didn't want to be an animator because I couldn't stand drawing the same thing a million times just to make it move for 5 seconds across the screen, right? I wanted to be more the illustrator. But in taking that course, I learned a lot about storytelling, gesture drawing. We did a lot of life drawing courses, so I was learning about anatomy and muscle and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of, throughout that, kind of realized like this was something like I wanted to illustrate, whether it be, you know, kids' books or graphic design kind of stuff, magazines, whatever. But I do remember doing a comic book when I was in college, just because I wanted to do one just to see if I could do it. Like I did all of it, the colors and the pencil art and inks and everything like that. And talking about David Finch, he actually came and talked to my class because he lives in my area.
Okay.
So he came and he talked to my class. And at this time, I think he was just doing New Avengers at Marvel. But I had known his stuff and had been a fan at that point from Ultimate X-Men because I was reading a lot of I was collecting all the Ultimate X-Men books. And so I started to notice him. And then it was mind-blowing to realize he's from my area, which again is a small kind of farming community. Either you work in the automotive industry at Chrysler Ford, or you kind of are out in the country doing, everybody I knew grew up near farms, on farms. And so it was kind of interesting to see like, here's a guy who's doing this professionally and he lives in my area. And so I was very inspired by his little talk. And I remember he brought in pages that he was working on that day. And then fast forward a few years later, I had built up a portfolio and I sent it to him. I just emailed him my portfolio, and all I wanted was just, hey, can you give me like a little portfolio review? What can I work on? And he invited me over to his house.
Oh shit.
So I went to his house, and I remember being utterly terrified. And Dave is he just tells the truth. And so he just plainly told me where everything that was wrong with my work. But he also said, but I do see that you have some talent here. So he gave me a project, go home, draw some buildings. He showed me how he does his buildings, how he does his perspective. He says, go home and do one page, fill this page with one panel, just a big city or something, and draw it. And so I went home and I ended up doing like 2 or 3 pages of that, and then brought him back a couple days later. And again, he kind of was very truthful and just critiqued it and ripped it kind of apart. But then showed me what I needed to fix. And so that began a 6-month sort of journey where I would go to his house every couple days, and he would give me a little project. I would go home, I'd work on that. Then I'd go back to his house and he would critique that, show me what I did right, show me what I did wrong, and then give me something else to work on. And sometimes it was just simply, we're going to work on hands for the next 3 weeks, and that's all. We just fill up pages of hands. And then we did little studies on different artists, try to draw like this guy, try to draw like that guy, and learn their anatomy and how they're doing things. And he was essentially, I think, training me to kind of become like a pencil assist for him at that time. Because he was at Marvel, but then he made the shift to DC, and he wasn't doing any interior stuff. He was just doing covers for a long time. And he's like, I know you want a job. So he's like, let's just put your portfolio in and see what they say. And so he approached his editors, sent my portfolio in, and I got my first job at DC. And and then I got my little foot in the door, and then everything else kind of fell into place in its time. But I'm always I'm very grateful to him, because he didn't need to do that. Like I now, seeing how busy my life is and how, like, he had young kids at that time too. I'm showing up in the middle of the day or in the morning when he's in his work, and then he's taking half an hour to an hour of time to come up and to show me something and to critique my work. And I learned so much from him, and I consider him a really good friend of mine. And he didn't need to do those things. So I'm forever grateful to him for taking that time with me, because it changed my life.
God, that is one hell of a story. That's awesome. Is there something from that time? Like, it obviously gave you a bunch of various lessons and things, but what's like the one piece of advice that you would say like still pops up in your head as you're maybe doing something on a page?
Oh man. Well, there's a few. I remember one of the things I remember talking to him a lot about, because he was at that time, he was showing me how to draw, and he's showing me how to draw the way he draws.
Right.
And which was cool, because I loved Dave's style, and I was always into like Mark Silvestri, and I was into Jim Lee. I wanted that big kind of bold, exaggerated, lots of shadows, lots of cross hatching kind of thing. That was the kind of art that I'm most attracted to.
Right. And
I remember asking him, saying, well, how am I going to get work? Because my work just kind of looks like your work. I've kind of developed a style, but it's essentially a rip off of your style. And I remember he just kind of said to me, he said, well, he's like, I've never had trouble finding work. If you draw like the artists that are the big draw, that get all the big projects, you will always have work. And so he told me this, he said, which I found this was very interesting. He said that he learned from Mark Silvestri one-on-one. And he said his early work was very much Mark Silvestri. And he said it took him a good 5 years to kind of find his voice. And he said, but don't worry about that. You will naturally find your voice, but you get your foot in the door. And if you draw like me, great. People will call you a Finch clone, all this kind of stuff. But he said, you're in the door. And he said, as you learn the craft, as you start to learn how to balance your quality and your time and all this kind of stuff, he's like, then you can start bringing in all those other inspirations into your work, that you can start looking at other artists and trying different things. And that was true. I started to look at other artists and looked at where I needed work and where I needed to change things. I remember I've always had really good editors, and I was always comfortable with saying to my editors at DC things like, I would ask for critiques. What can I do better? How can I make my work better? And they would give me the truth. They would say, this, you can work on this, work on your faces, work on this, blah, 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 blah. And then I took that to heart. And so I would start to study other artists who, one actually being Gary Frank, who is now, I'm working with at Ghost Machine now. We're partnered in that. But Gary had these just excellent faces and expressions. And it's like, if you're going to study expressions, he's the person you go and you look at. So then you start bringing that into your work. And I kind of started moving away from I still do a lot of cross-hatchy stuff, but I started looking at other artists and the way that they cross-hatch instead of just trying to replicate what Dave was doing, even though I really like his style. But and things changed over time, and with different projects, you do different things. The way I'm drawing on Rook is different than the way I drew Batman 3 Jokers. I'm giving myself a little more leeway to be a little more rough and just kind of throw lines wherever instead of being more tight like I was. But that was one thing I found interesting. It's like, if you want to get into this industry, draw. There's certain artwork that and certain artists that get the big jobs at DC, Marvel, and if you look at those artists, they have very similar kind of styles, and it goes back to those styles that are the more famous artists. And he said, if you kind of follow that path, you won't have any trouble ever finding work. But another thing that I remember talking a lot about was just work ethic. You have to get your books done on time, all the time. I don't care if that means you work 7 days a week. I don't care if that means you work your holidays. You just do it, because just say, yes, I will get it done, and just do it. And he said, a lot of artists, they're great artists, but they lack that work ethic, or they lack the ability to get to be dependable. Yeah. And so that was one thing he really hammered with me, was you have to be disciplined. You have to get that stuff done and when your deadline is there. Just focus on that. Sometimes it may mean your quality isn't 100. You got to rush through some stuff. He said, but just get the work done. It gets you another book. It gets you another book. And you slowly can build your career by doing that. And that led to bigger and bigger jobs, because I was dependable. I might not have been the best artist, but I was dependable, and they could count on me to get that work done. And I remember talking to him a lot about that too. I
love hearing that, because ironically, the episode before this one was with David Finch, and so hearing him explain his process, right, but then also hearing it through you as someone who learned from him is fascinating. So if someone's listening to this and you haven't listened to the last episode, by all means, go back, check that one out. Dave is a master at what he does, and so to see how it affects someone like Jason is phenomenal.
And can I say this too? For any artists out there who are thinking like, wow, Jay, like, you got this awesome. I mean, I was very fortunate to be able to go to Dave's house and learn one-on-one, like to have somebody teach you one-on-one. But Dave's YouTube channel
is phenomenal.
He has a lot of those tutorials that are there is exactly what he was teaching me, only I was in front of him. Right. So I could ask more questions and he could critique my work one-on-one. But if I tell a lot of young artists or aspiring artists, when they bring their portfolios at conventions, I say, if you're really serious about this, go watch his channel, sit there, and when he's drawing hands, you just watch that video 100 times and draw those hands out 100 times. Like just fill up pages full of, and then move on to when he does the forearms, move on to when he does the heads, and just focus on that, the fundamentals of building. It's like building a house. You got to build the foundation first before you put up the walls and before you put up the painting and the decoration. So it's like building the foundation of your art is something you need to do first before you put all the bells and whistles on there. And so that Dave's channel has all the things there. It's up to you to work at it.
It is a masterclass that is right there on YouTube for you for free.
Yep.
So Jay, let's talk a little bit about putting the starting to build the walls of your career. So like, obviously you break in a way that you kind of burst onto the scene. For you, as someone who obviously wanted to get into this business, but coming in kind of the way that you did, was it overwhelming at all at first for you? Like, what were some of those early projects and years kind of like for you? And just like, what did it take to adjust?
Yeah, I remember the first two jobs I got I was a fill-in artist on Superman, Batman.
Mm-hmm.
It was like issue 71 and 72 or 70 and 71, something like that. And I remember being very overwhelmed. In fact, I'll say it now. At the time, I didn't say this, but I remember going over to Dave's house, bringing pages and just saying like, I need help. And he's sitting there and him like laying out some of the gestures and pages. And then I would go in and just kind of doodle in the finishes, because I was behind, like going from working on a portfolio, which was like 6-7 pages, and spending like 3 weeks doing 6 pages, to now you got to draw a page a day. It was like a shock. And there was a whole bunch of stuff that kind of, with that book, I lost my anchor. And it's like, I thought when I finished those two, but I did get the 2 issues done. And so I finished those 2 issues, and I remember thinking, I don't know if they're ever going to hire me again. Like, like I might have just blown my opportunity. But later, talking to some of my editors and whatnot, they said, no, actually, you just finishing that work solved the problem, and that ended up getting you more work down the line. But after I finished those 2 issues, I didn't have any work for quite a while. Like, it was like weeks, and I like, there was nothing. I was kind of, didn't want to bother editors, but I was talking to them, hey, is there anything else? And didn't hear much. So Dave actually said to me, he said, come with me to C2E2. It was the first year that C2E2 was going. So this was like in 2010, I think, 2010, April. And so he said, come with me to C2E2 and I'll introduce you to some different people. And so I went there and I met with the guys from Aspen Comics. And Dave had worked with a bunch of those guys at Top Cow. And so they ended up saying, hey, we got some work for you. Why don't you come and work with us? You can learn to do this job at a slower pace. They knew that my aspirations was to work at DC, but they were like, look, come and just learn comics. You can learn the ropes. And so I did that. I went and I worked with Aspen for a couple of years on Soulfire. And it just, like I said, it allowed me to slow down. It allowed me to, if I needed 2-3 days to draw a page, I could. But I slowly started to challenge myself to learn to draw quicker and to learn to get down to, I want to draw a page in a day. So what do I need to do to get there? And so I did that for about 1.5 years. And then Dave was working on Batman the Dark Knight. This was pre-New 52. So he's working on that book, and he was jumping into the New 52 relaunch stuff. And so he had 2 issues of his book that he was writing and drawing, and he said, do you want to draw the last 2 issues? I said, sure. And so that got me back into DC. I did those 2 issues, and then they had Mike Marks, who was in the DC Batman office. He had said, look, we want to sign you to an exclusive and get you on a Batman book. And I said, well, I got to finish my obligations with Aspen. I had a couple more issues. He said, that's great. Let's sign a deal right now. And then as soon as you're done. And so we worked something out, and
straight to
the guys from Aspen the guys from Aspen were very understanding, because they knew that was my dream and my goal. Right. And so, but I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. So I finished up doing the Soulfire books that I had to do. I think it was like 2 issues or whatever. And then DC put me on Detective Comics, I think. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, went right into that. And it was, but it all kind of built up and worked at its own pace. And by the time I got to those Batman gigs, I felt I'd figured it out. I'd figured out figured out how to draw this thing, how to make it work within my daily life. I wasn't in a panic anymore.
There you go.
But Dave was always there too. Like I could always call him and say like, hey, I need help. Like, how do I approach this? And so he would take the time to go through different things or say, hey, come on over, let's talk about it. I'll show you kind of some things. And but yeah, it was. I think it was great.
One of the things that it feels like is coming out in just the conversation that we're having is almost the importance of having either a mentor or at least some form of a community around you to be able to either bounce things off of or just like talk about the work with. So I guess leading to that, how did the you and Geoff relationship start?
Yeah. Well, going back to just what you said about the community, one of the things that I loved hearing the stories with Dave was about when he was working at Top Cow and he moved to California and he worked in a studio with all those guys. And so he was working next to like Travis Charest and like Mark Silvestri's drawing over there. And so their comics used to be kind of in those early Image days, especially too, like you had Rob Liefeld has his own thing and Jim Lee had Wildstorm. Like you had these bullpen kind of experiences where guys were working together and they're feeding off each other and they're also learning from each other. They're learning new skills or, hey, I'm going to try that out with the way I draw that, or I'm going to ink this differently. But now with the digital age, you don't really have that. Everything, like I never had to move to do my work. I just lived in my same community and I work in my house and I only ever see guys if I go to a convention. And so having Dave close was that, to me, that was that little bit of that community being, like you said, being able to go and talk to him, that helped. And it's Geoff is kind of that now with me. So Geoff and I, like he's 10 years older than me. And so he and I, he jokes a lot and says, he thinks of me almost like as like a little brother to him, like, and so I get to learn now. I'm learning a lot of wisdom and knowledge and things that he's learned from the comic industry and Hollywood and the film. And I'm learning all of that. And I'm learning he's always saying like, this was a mistake I made.
Right.
And I did this, and this is how you would avoid that. And so, so there is that relationship is with I have with Geoff now is similar, to that, like a mentorship kind of thing. And the funny story with Geoff was like, I was working at DC, I was doing a bunch of different things and I really wanted to do something different. I wanted to do Justice League. I had done some Batman stuff for quite a few years. And I just felt like, maybe a good evolution would be to get on Batman. But so I reached out actually to Dan DiDio and just said, hey, I would love to work on this project and work on Justice League. And he said, well, we already have artists on that, but we'll think about it. Keep working on the, I forget what Batman book I was, maybe it was Batman Eternal or something like that. And so, but then one night it was like Geoff's on like California time and I'm on Eastern time. One night at like 11 o'clock at night, I get a text from Geoff Johns and he just says, can you talk?
You up?
And I was just kind of like, what's going on here? Like, am I in trouble? Did I say something? Did I do something? I don't know. And so, yeah, sure, Geoff. And so he gives me a call. By this time, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and he's apologizing. He's like, oh, I didn't know you were on Eastern time. I'm sorry. But when Geoff gets something, like when something gets in his head and he's excited, he needs to kind of act on it. So I understand that about him now. But we ended up talking for a good hour and he just said, look, I want you to come on Justice League and work on the book with me. And he started pitching this Dark Side War thing. But he said, let's do a story arc that kind of helps us build into that. And so that was kind of the start of that. And so we worked on Justice League together. Then he kind of went off and did a bunch of the movie stuff. And we had this Three Jokers thing kind of planned and part like it was just kind of waiting there for us. And so he went off and did some stuff, and I went off and did some stuff, and then we came back together and then worked for a couple of years on Three Jokers and released that. That came out in 2020, and that book kind of helped again to build a bond that we had. And I think one of the things as an artist you're always kind of searching for is you're searching for that creative partner who can you can riff off of. And I worked with some really good writers at DC, but Geoff was different in the sense that he really believes in the power of collaboration, and he really wanted to hear my ideas.
Right.
He wanted to hear if I had and I would sometimes just tell him an idea, and then it's funny, all of a sudden you come to a script and he's it's kind of there. He would kind of change it around and do different things, but he would tell it in his own way, but I'd be like, oh, cool. Like that's kind of there. And so, it became this very open kind of collaboration between the two of us. And we kind of found like a great partnership together. And then, that's led into what we're doing at Ghost Machine now too. And so, but I think that's, and I think it's very important. Once you're in that kind of a work relationship where there is true collaboration, you can't go back. You can't go back to just getting like, oh, here's a script and you do it. It's like, no, we didn't talk about this. Like Geoff and I talk about the stories. We talk about what the next issue is going to be. I like to hear his pitch because sometimes I say, well, can we put in something like this? Or I feel like it needs more of this. And then he'll go back and he'll put that in there, or he'll change things around. And it, as an artist, it makes you feel more involved in the creation process and the creative process of the book. And that, I mean, we did that with Three Jokers. I went down to California and sat in a room with him for a day, or maybe even 2 days, and we just went through the whole Three Joker story and laid it all out, and we changed things around, and I could say, hey, what about this scene? What about that? What if we did this? What if we did that? And then same thing with Rook. Rook was a lot of that, a lot of going back and forth and changing things and bouncing out ideas, and it still is that. So, but it's such a, again, writers, involve your artists. It'll make your project that much better. Like it'll lift the project up. It gets them more involved in the work. And and you also build like a friendship with that person, and it that also shows in the work. You care about it because you care about the person you're working with.
Right. So can I ask maybe for you? So obviously, it sounds like that in some of your early work with some other folks, right? Like just getting that straight full script kind of thing, it seems like maybe makes the work a little bit tedious. But for you, what were maybe some of the things you felt you learned about yourself as you found other people to really collaborate with that made you a better collaborator? And what are maybe some of the really important things outside of just listening to one another that makes good collaboration?
Well, I think humility, knowing that you don't have all the answers and your way isn't the right way, isn't perfect. Geoff thinks like a writer. He is a writer. I'm not.
Right.
I think in visual, and I think of this would be a cool scene to draw because it has a car chase and explosions and a guy punching a guy in the face or something like. And Geoff thinks, well, what is the emotion behind this? Where is this bringing the character? Where how is all this coming together? And that's one thing that he's really, because we have this. It's funny. I bring it up quite a bit because I'm like I see comics as like testosterone fueled. Like I just want, like if I'm drawing Batman, I just want to draw him beating the heck out of people.
Right.
Like and cool cars and cool splash pages and punches and all kinds of stuff. And he's thinking, no, like we got to tell the story. You got to have flow. You got to have quiet parts, and you got to have emotional parts, and you got to build to this. And because he's thinking of it more as this cohesive like story arc that goes from this to that. And that's one thing I've learned from him. I've learned to embrace more of that. I still bring up the, hey, I want this character to have a sword and he's going to do something cool. But it's thinking about those little, how can we weave more emotion into this story? How can we get the character to go from point A to point B? That's what I've learned a lot from Geoff. And also he's truthful with me too. And sometimes when I'm being too hard on myself, he's just like, no, this page looks great. Like, just move on. Like, this is great. Like you think it needs to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect.
Right.
It's excellent. You've done it to the best of your ability with the time you've given. Let's move on to the next page. Let's do it. But yeah, Geoff challenges me. Like, sometimes I'll get angry at certain things that are outside of our control. And he's like, 10 years ago, I would have flipped out about this too. But now that I'm a little older, he's like, I've learned that it really doesn't matter. Like, just calm down. We'll just move. And so, it's fun to kind of bounce these things off of each other and to learn from him and learn more about who I am and what I want to do and what I want to accomplish. I feel like especially since doing the Ghost Machine stuff, I'm thinking bigger than just I want to draw Batman. It's like I'm thinking more, no, I want to create new characters, new legacies. I want to create something for a new generation. I want to do this with the story. I want to tell this kind of a story. I want this theme to be in there or that theme. I want the world to go this way. Like, I'm thinking bigger than just I'm just doing a page today, kind of thing.
Well, so outside of obviously the relationship that you and Geoff have been able to foster with one another, was there an aha moment for you or a light bulb moment that said, when presented with the idea of something like Ghost Machine, that we're like, yes, this is where I want to put my energy next?
Yes, there was a few. I knew that after we had finished 3 Jokers, we were toying around with doing a sequel, and we had a story all figured out, and things just didn't line up for a variety of reasons. But at that point, I kind of started to we kind of were talking like, what do we want to do next? Is there things we want to do at Marvel, or is there any I just kind of was sitting there going like, I feel like I've accomplished everything I wanted to do at DC. Mm-hmm. And I was reading a lot of image books and a lot of some manga stuff, and I was reading some like European comics, and I was really inspired by creating something new, creating like new original kind of ideas and new characters instead of like, I love Batman, and it's an honor to work on that character, and it's an honor to draw Superman and all this stuff. But these characters have been around for 80 years, and it's great to have your little shot on them. But really, like, I don't know. I started to look at guys like Mike Mignola and what he's doing on Hellboy, and then Todd McFarlane and Spawn, and what Robert Kirkman was doing with like Walking Dead. And it's like, these guys created something new, and they stuck to it, and they were consistent with it. And now look at where those characters are. And it took time to build that up. It took time to build that legacy of 300 plus Spawn issues, you know, and it's like that to me felt like a great challenge. It felt like this is going to be hard. Success is not going to come overnight. If it does, great. If it doesn't, whatever, I can stick it out because I believe in it. And I think it'll be that much more rewarding in the end. And it was, the easy way was to kind of just go back to DC, collect my paycheck, work on something that I would have put my heart and my soul into. But I don't know if my heart was 100% there. I would have had to really force it. Whereas with this, I'm like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the hardest stuff I've ever drawn. It's tough to do this. It's way harder than at DC, but it's very rewarding. Another just kind of weird thing, again, going back to Image, was I had a conversation with Rob Liefeld at a convention, And he kind of just said, look, I really love your work. You're doing great at DC. He said, but he's like, you should really think about going off and doing your own thing and accepting that challenge of building a legacy outside of DC Marvel. And I remember being very hesitant to that. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like I'm going to be doing like this Three Jokers thing. It's going to be huge. And he just said, yeah, it will be huge. But he said, what's next? He's like, you don't get caught in this thing of just doing, like, he's like, take a chance. You never know. And so that kind of stuck with me. Like I told that story a couple of times, but it's like just Rob, like kind of just challenging me. Mm-hmm. Hey, think about doing this. It could be a success. It may not be a success, but you did it. And you could say you did it. And, it's legacy. It's something that you own. Nobody can take it from you, and that became something that having kids and it's like, I can't hand much of my DC stuff to them except for some pages and covers and stuff. But everything I do with Ghost Machine, I can hand them. They'll own it. Mm-hmm. It's a legacy for them. And maybe in their lifetime, it gets turned into a movie or something, and now they benefit from it. So there was all these kinds of things. But really for me, I think it was the challenge of just wanted to do something new. I wanted to put, like, I talked so much with Geoff about wanting to see new ideas. Mm-hmm. Instead of just rehashing the same, making 100 million Star Wars movies. It's and everything. It's like, yeah, those are fun and I enjoy them, but like, I want to see something new. I want to see something exciting, and things like Stranger Things at that time was really a hit. Sure. And it's like that. It feels familiar, but it's new. Yep. And it's fun, and it creates a new world that people are invested in. Mm. And I don't know. That was always. My goal shifted from I want to just do the biggest stuff I can at DC to I want to create new things and create legacy and follow in the footsteps of guys like Todd and Mike Mignola and Mark Silvestri and all these kind of guys who went off and did something different.
Rook Exodus is truly a perfect example of starting a new project and having the world that you're building feel so incredibly thought out, lived in, and authentic. For you, what's it like building that world from scratch? What are things that you have to think about that you didn't even realize you had to think about in building out the cast of the Wardens, the idea of what the Wardens are, right? And what Exodus is. All of this stuff obviously comes from conversations you and Geoff are having, but it doesn't become real until you put pen to paper.
Mm. Yeah, it's been a huge challenge. Rook has been something, like the character itself has been something that's been rolling around in my head for years. It goes before I was even in comics. Mm-hmm. But it kind of evolved over time into this character. I had these sketches and stuff, and because I always kind of sat there thinking, like, one day I want to take some time and go and do a creator-owned book, even if it was just 6 issues. I'll write and draw it. Mm-hmm. And this is the character I want to do. And he's kind of the space mercenary kind of guy. And he's got a bird helmet. And he has guns and all this kind of stuff.
And he just looks badass.
He just looks cool. And I had some other characters that were just everybody. Like he was the only guy whose had a mask and stuff. And I remember pitching when Geoff and I were talking about books. I showed him all this artwork. And he just kept on asking, well, what's the story? And I was like, I have no clue. I've been like, I don't know. I don't really know. Is he somebody who hops from planet to planet? Is he somebody who is it like Star Wars? And he's like a space vigilante. And then the thing that kind of broke that is he said, well, why does he wear a bird mask? And I said, I said, well, it just looks cool. Like, it's like, you have Batman and he dresses like a bat, and you have, Hawkman and he dresses like a hawk. Like, this just kind of follows in that footsteps of he took on the persona of this bird, And he said, well, what if he can control real birds? And then I remember this, I still can see it in my mind, like this Zoom call. And all of a sudden, it's like a light went off and we just started rattling off all these characters. And like we had the bear guy and dire wolf and the stag, the deer guy. And we had all these, we had no names for him. It was just bear man and, like wolf girl, but it clicked. And then everything else from that was like, how can we make this a unique kind of world? And so we decided, let's stick with one planet. Let's have the planet kind of dying. So that gives you like this sense of urgency to save something. And then it's like, what are the animal life there? What if it's almost like a prehistoric kind of thing where the animal life has gotten bigger because it's been bioengineered, or just the atmosphere of the planet has allowed creatures to grow bigger like they were in the past, and so you got giant bears and deer and all kinds of stuff. And all of these things just kind of all fell into place. And it just felt like something I'd been searching for so long. Like, you're searching for kind of an original idea. Everything really has been done. It's just, how can you twist it to make it a little more original, or have its own vibe? And it's like, oh my gosh, we may have found something here. And the story just started to flow from that. And going back to your question though, one of the things that's interesting is that, when we're working on like Justice League or Batman, and Geoff says, Batman visits the Gotham Aquarium. Well, I know what the Gotham Aquarium looks like. Right. Even if it hasn't been drawn, I know what kind of it should look like, because there's the visual language to Gotham City. You don't have to I don't have to sit there and think too long about what a thug looks like in Gotham that's mugging somebody. Mm-hmm. It's like, I kind of know what that looks like, and you play off the history. But when you're doing this, and Geoff says there's a village that's in a swamp built on a waterfall, it sounds easy to, it's like, yeah, but it's like, well, what does that look like? Yeah. And what do the buildings look like? And what kind of clothing do these people wear? Takes place in the future, but it's like a Mad Max future world. Like, what do the vehicles look like? Is there spaceships? Is there and what do their guns look like? Are they common guns, or are they just are they Star Warsy guns? And we really had to think about all that stuff. And every time Geoff puts something in there, mm-hmm. It takes me sometimes quite a long time to find a design for it. Like he just, in the first arc, there's a vehicle. Ursa has this giant, it's called the Ark, but essentially Geoff described it as a boat on wheels, like Noah's Ark on wheels. It's like, okay, well, but what does that look like? Right. So I must have gone through like 15 different designs, and I actually probably overdid it, because I probably should have just I ended up going with my first design. But it's like I had this vision of like an aircraft carrier on wheels, mm-hmm. And it's like, but you have to think about all that stuff. And I remember having a conversation with Greg Capullo. He was working on, I think it's called Reborn with Mark Miller. And I said, well, it must be fun. Like, must be easy. You get to just make up whatever. And he said, no. He's like, I'm spending most of my time designing every little character and every little thing, because you got to think about all of this stuff. And then doing this now, I've come to realize, like, I am thinking about every little tiny thing. Like, because you're, like you said, you're trying to make a realized, believable world.
Right.
And you want to do it right from the get-go. And how do you do that? And so one of the tricks that Geoff talks a lot about is we need to ground certain things in things that we know. So like there's a scene in the first issue or second issue where Rook is in a pizza parlor it's like a destroyed, dilapidated city, but there's an old pizza parlor and he's there. And it's like, that's something a little familiar. I'm sure there'll be pizza parlors in the future, So it's like, we can play with that. And we can play with different things. Like, what if the characters go to a sci-fi shopping mall or something? Right. Like, you can kind of ground things in a reality that we know. It doesn't have to be, just because it's science fiction, it doesn't have to be so outside of the realm of what we believability or what we know. So we ground things in those sorts of sort of elements. And so yeah, it's very tough. It's very hard, and it's something that your brain never turns off. So it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. At the end of the day, you're coming upstairs and I'm just toast because I've been thinking about all this stuff. And on weekends, I'm thinking when I'm on vacation, I'm writing ideas down. But when it all comes together and you get those colored pages back from Brad Anderson, it's like, yeah, this is cool. Like it's real. Yeah. It's a real thing, you know?
So for you then, like, you know, as the first issue comes out and as the first arc is happening, I mean, obviously the fan reaction was phenomenal, right? And so for you, what was getting that kind of reaction like on something that was your baby? You know, to you know, just how do you accept that?
Yeah. It was, I remember being so nervous leading up to that book coming out. Issue 1, I think I redrew most of it. While I was working on other issues, I went back and redrew because I changed, like, you draw characters a certain way. And then I realized once I hit like issue 2, issue 3, I need to change things with Rook's mask and I need to do this with his costume. And so then I went back and I redrew a bunch of stuff from issue 1 until I got it to a point where I was like, I'm happy with this. This looks, I'm proud of this. And, but it was really cool to see the fan reaction and people really dug the book. Because again, you're competing against all these other books that are on the shelf. You want to make a statement. You want something that's unique and cool. And people are always asking for new things, but are they really willing to try it out? Are they willing to check it out and keep with it? But the reaction's been great, and I got to see some, you know, you start seeing fan art and people are designing, like 3D printing, like they're making the 3D masks and 3D printing them, and it's like, it's cool. Like
does that make it more real for you?
Yeah. The world of Rook, I feel, has so much potential. You know, we're only 6 issues in, you know, plus the next arc that's coming out, but it's like we're just kind of scratching the surface, but it has so much potential to grow into all kinds of other things and have spin-off books and spin-off characters and all. Like, I really see that, but it's like you got to kind of hold yourself back and say, number one, you have to have healthy expectations, because this is something new. So I knew that the book wasn't going to come out and it's going to be all of a sudden that's everybody cares about it like they cared about Batman work. It's like, no, like I feel like this is a long game, and it's something that as more and more story arcs come out and more trades come out and more, like, we just keep building this world. I really do believe it's one of those books that will eventually click with a bigger and bigger audience as we go, and people will really, they'll really see the potential of this series and these characters, and they'll, you know, I love these characters, but like I said, we're only just scratching the surface. Right. And Geoff is so good at finding those little character things in each character moments to really give you sympathy towards this character, learn about their backstory. And he's always pushing, like, how can we fit that into this action adventure story? How can we tell a little bit of their past so that it connect with an audience? But it's, you know, my biggest downfall with Rook is the fact that I just can't draw more than 6 issues a year.
Sure.
So the book can't be a monthly book. I at this point, I don't want to just hand it off to other artists to come in and do it. I feel like I need to have my fingerprints on it for quite a long time, because it's coming out of my mind.
Right. You've got a vision for it, and it's a vision that you and Geoff are really working on. And so, like, I get it. But honestly though, I think one of the things, and like, I want to get to what's coming up in the next arc, but I think that's one of the things that people actually appreciate about this, right? Because I think, like, in what we've seen, I think what you guys will see with the return is fans really dig what you guys are doing there. And I think like it only has, like you said, it only has room to grow. It's got nowhere to go but up. And you're starting from a now, right? You're going back to our original analogy. That first arc was the foundation. This second arc, you're about to start putting up some walls and then hopefully start decorating a little bit. So let's talk about the second arc. I've read the first issue, and one of the things that I think I want to call out is you guys do such a phenomenal job in this issue catching people up. And I think it's one of the most important things that a second arc can do, regardless of when it comes out. And so obviously, you guys have to spend some real estate doing that. And I think you guys knock it out of the park. So this is super. If you missed out, the first trade is going to be available or is available. And but this is something that you can jump right in. And then if you want to go back and catch up. But that said, what are you excited for the second arc?
There's lots of stuff. Again, like you said, I'm excited about just building out the world, expanding some of these characters. We get to dive in with more of the characters that we've met in the first arc with Direwolf and Rook. Get to learn a little bit about them and their past. But then we get to introduce new characters too. Mm-hmm. So, we have Bloodhound, who is Direwolf's father, who's been driven rabid from the instinct influence, which is something these helmets that these wardens wear. They're able to control the animals and communicate with the animal that they're kind of the avatar of. But there's also a bit of the animal that comes back into their brains too. And so these wardens are they have to learn to kind of balance that and not allow those the instinct and influences of these animals to turn them into a beast themselves. But Direwolf's father, Bloodhound, has been his mind is lost, and they believe that he may know how they can restart the world engines and essentially save a dying planet. So they're searching for him, and he's a fun character because he's essentially, I'm drawing upon werewolf kind of stories, and that was the original Direwolf character was originally called Werewolf, and so and it was going to be a male character, and so it's kind of fun to go back and kind of play with that. We also have a character that a lot of people have been asking about, and they want to see, and they wanted to see from the first arc, and that's Stag. And really the inspiration for him is he's like a Japanese Ronin samurai kind of ninja guy where he uses swords and bows and arrows, and he's got this cool deer helmet that's red that looks like a deer skull. He wears black, and it's kind of just a visceral kind of design. It's something that's been there since day one, and that comes from my love of like samurai and Japanese inspired kind of stories. And so we get to meet this character, and he's got a great backstory, and he's hunting after Bloodhound himself for his own reasons. And so it's fun to play with those new characters and bring them along this journey with Rook, with Direwolf. This story, one of the interesting things about this story, though, is whereas in the first arc we went really big and we went all to these different areas in the world, and we saw kind of set up the world. This story arc is actually inspired more by things like Alien and Aliens, where it's like these characters are put in a situation where they have to survive. And we've mentioned it before, so it's not a huge spoiler, but we're going to meet the Warden of Spiders, Arachnid, and he plays a big role in this whole story, and has a role in why the world engines have failed. And it is creepy, and if you have arachnophobia, I'm sorry.
You're right. You did mention that, like, you're drawing a lot of spiders. Do you regret not making him the Warden of Elephants?
Yeah.
Less
Elephants
scary,
would be
less
tough.
scary, but
Yeah.
obviously much bigger. You don't have to
Yeah.
draw as many.
The spiders are creepy, and you know, drawing, hundreds of spiders attacking, and they're not small either.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that spiders I've always loved, like with fantasy movies, like I love the scene in The Hobbit where they have to fight the spiders and Shelob and Lord of the Rings, and like there's those fantasy elements. I'm a big fantasy fan, Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff. So it's like I love the ideas of like going into the spider's cave to kill the giant spider in Dungeons and Dragons. Like so, it's like that kind of worked its way into Rook.
But I think that's one of the cool things about what you have set up with the world of Rook and Exodus and all that, and that like it sounds like you guys are taking maybe a little bit of a turn into something that's a little bit more horror driven or whatever. But it doesn't mean that like you can't then jump into a different genre and tell that kind of story in this same world. Have you wanted to like draw a bit more horror stuff? And is that kind of where this comes from a little bit? Or did it just kind of come naturally with the story you guys wanted to tell?
I think it kind of just came naturally with the story. I'm not a huge horror fan. Geoff likes horror movies, but I saw it more from a fantasy angle of like, I kept saying to Geoff, like, we should do stories where they have to go into the dark dungeon to do something. And there's horrific things down there. You got to fight the giant spider. You got to fight the dragon, like, so it's like, I look at it more like that direction, but it's like, it's fun, but Geoff's finding little ways of expanding the world through the story, where we're going to see little bits and pieces of things out that are happening outside of that. And but then, like, I don't know, we have so many different story ideas, and we're always we have a bigger overarching narrative that we know we want to get to one day, and some of that stuff is just like absolute insanity. And so it's like, we got to build up towards that. Like you don't want to do your world shaking kind of things in the second arc. You've got to build slowly towards those things. And the thing we're learning with this book is you can tell a story that's maybe more horror based, but then you could do a story that's, I've pitched a couple ideas that are way more lighthearted and funny, involving other wardens. And so it's like, you can play with these different genres, and we could do a chase story. We can do a heist. We could like, there's all kinds of stuff we could do within this world. And that's something that, again, like, it just really excites me that we can play with these different stories, different genres. It could be more Western one time. Maybe it's more Star Wars science fiction. Maybe it's horror this time. Like, you can play with those things, and you can find a story in there, and it just, I don't know, it just gives the world that much more interest. It's much more interesting to me. I'm not stuck. Nothing limits us with our imagination. That's what's fun about it.
That is probably the perfect place to call it. I can talk to you about this for hours. Thank you so much for the time. We're gonna have to do this again for sure. Like at some point, because I think there's so much not only to talk about with Rook, but I'd love hearing your philosophy to storytelling and how you approach all of that stuff. So for those listening, make sure you tell your retailer you need at least 3 copies of Rook Exodus number 7. It is, if you have not read it, this is a perfect time to jump in, because then you can go get the trade and catch up. Jump in now, read the story moving ahead, catch up on what you need. If you've been waiting for Rook 7, man, you only have to wait just a few short weeks. Or if you're listening to this and Rook 7 has already been out, great. Now you get the commentary track, the insight on how it came together, and all that. So Jay, thank you again. I appreciate the time, and we'll catch you on the next one, man.
Yeah, for sure. I'm up for it anytime. Great conversation.
Love it. Well, that does it for another episode of Let's Talk Comics. Thank you again to Mr. Jason Fabok for giving us such a great inside look to how Rook Exodus came together, how it's being built from the ground up, and how Jason is having the time of his life doing this book. What I love about conversations like this is that they remind me how, like, to see a creator kind of go completely unleashed on a book like Jason is doing in this is so, like, if that doesn't make you, if there's a project you got sitting on a back burner somewhere, pick it up, do it, and just see what comes out, because it's not only is it fulfilling, but gives you the opportunity to learn and just do what you want to do. So like I said at the tail end of the conversation, if you haven't yet, go pick up the trade. The first trade is, one, gorgeous to look at, but two, it's paired with a brilliant story by Geoff Johns. So definitely pick that up. And do not sleep on the return. Rook 7 is back in just a few short weeks, and it is so good. Business again, like if you haven't at this point already, subscribe to the show, please. If you are listening to the show, take a screenshot, share it on social. If you haven't left a review on iTunes or Spotify, please do so. Other than that, we've got a few really great guests lined up for you coming up. We'll have one just a few short days after this one, and then a killer one that is almost 11 years in the making for next week. Who is it? Well, you're just going to have to tune in to find out. Make sure you're buying comics and make sure you're reading comics, because as long as you're doing those two things, we'll keep talking about them. We'll catch you next time, folks.